Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's been a very long time since my last video, nearly a month. I apologize for the delay, but December and the new year have been quite busy here, almost crazy busy. For those of you who watched my last video, I think I mentioned that we would be going on a ski holiday up to Hokkaido. After the ski holiday, of course, we had the Christmas holiday, and then following the Christmas holiday, we had the New Year's holiday. And the combination of these three things has, of course, occupied a lot of time. Another thing which it has caused is a delay in the shipping of things. I sold a lot of cameras during this period, and of course, due to the holidays, Christmas and New Year's holiday, it's been difficult to get everything shipped out as quickly as I normally do. Everything in Japan is pretty much closed from the end of Christmas until January 4th. I was able to get a lot of stuff shipped out, luckily, on January 3rd, and pretty much everything else went out on the 4th. So for those of you who have ordered cameras from me, if you go ahead and track them now, you'll probably see that they are on their way. I apologize for the delay, but it's really difficult, and the combination of the weekend and the regular holidays kind of extended the holiday longer than it normally is. Not good for some people, really wonderful for workers who can enjoy a couple of extra days off, more than what they would normally get. But for everyone else, kind of a little bit of heartache and delay. Here in Japan, all the ATM machines are, and online banking is pretty much down for a week. So when it comes to doing things like moving money around with PayPal or online banking, that's not possible during the New Year's holiday. It sounds like very 1995 to American and European standards, but that's kind of the way it is here in Japan. But as I said, luckily everything is on its way. The skiing trip was very nice. We went up to Niseko, which is in Hokkaido, kind of toward the west southern part, not far from Sapporo. Niseko is a very beautiful place, which is situated around Mount Yote, which is an old volcano. Quite a beautiful and scenic place, and really wonderful for the snow in the winter. Niseko gets a lot of snow every winter, or at least it has for the last 3 years that we've gone. And it's this wonderful powder snow, which is really wonderful for those people who enjoy skiing. Or at least I like the powder snow. I don't know if everyone else does. I like some European friends who kind of scoff at it and say that it slows you down and you can't do all the kind of stuff you can do and on a regular, like on maybe European normal snow. But I think that's just national preference. For myself, I kind of like the powder snow here, except in a couple of places where it gets so deep, and I fell down into it and had a hard time getting back up onto my skis. It's, when you fall off your skis and you find yourself waist deep in the snow, it can be a little bit difficult to get them put back on. But all in all, it was quite a wonderful trip up there. Very quiet in Niseko this year. Japanese people don't tend to go so much to Niseko. They tend to go to the ski resorts on Honshu, say to Nagano, Hakuba, places like that, as Niseko is a little bit far away. Niseko is mostly popular with foreign visitors, mainly Chinese, Australian, Canadian, and Europeans, who come there for, I guess, the beautiful unspoiled scenery, the very deep powder snow, and also the wonderful food which they have up in Hokkaido. It was kind of interesting being there because on the weekdays there was almost no one on the slopes, and the resort we went to is kind of just opened this year after extensive remodeling and everything, with the wonderful heated seats on the ski lifts and sheltered gondolas and things like that, but no one actually coming to enjoy it. There were like no lines at the lifts, and you go up to the top and you go down the runs and you find yourself alone. And even if you stop to enjoy, take a breath and enjoy the scenery, you can be there 10 minutes before someone else passes you. Kind of surreal, and I guess we kind of are enjoying it while we can, because eventually the pandemic has to end and the tourists have to start coming back, and then the lines and everything will return. But for now, we kind of made the most of the time we spent up in Niseko. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the subject of today's video here after 4.5 minutes. Today I'm going to be talking about another medium format camera, a square format 6x6 120 roll film camera, the Bronica SQ, and SQ means square. This camera was introduced around 1980 to replace the 6x45 format Bronica ETR. It's a more technically advanced 6x6 camera. Very similar with sharing the same lines as say like the classic Hasselblad camera. Kind of basically a Hasselblad design, but improved, at least as far as Bronica considers improvement, and I guess I would too. A more sophisticated system, and a camera which, being a fraction the price of a Hasselblad, will give you 98 or 99% of the performance of a Hasselblad. So a really good deal and a really wonderful camera for anyone who wants to shoot, I guess, a medium format camera and doesn't want to spend a couple grand on a Hasselblad. The basic design of this camera is it's made of three main parts. Here we have the center part, which is the camera body. In the front we have the lens and shutter mechanism, and in the back we have the film holder. In the camera body, we pretty much just have a mirror which flips back and forth, and the mechanism which is attached to the film winding back and winds the film. And we have a place on the top for mounting a viewfinder or a prism. And then we have the basic controls on the camera. The shutter mechanism is built into the lens like it is on Hasselblad and a lot of other of the, I guess, pro quality medium format cameras. And basically, it's just a box in the middle with a lens and a place to hold the film, a mirror to allow you to focus, and the shutter which opens and closes and lets the light through. A lot of people will look at one of these cameras and wonder why anyone will want to shoot with something like this, and especially when you consider how technologically advanced the digital cameras are today. And I would say that for the first thing, 120 roll film has an incredible amount of resolution, and currently no digital camera on the market comes anywhere close to producing the same resolution that 120 roll film has. Indeed, pretty much every digital camera which I know of, at least ones that don't cost multi-million dollars, don't even have the same resolution as 35mm film. In addition to the film resolution, you have, I guess, dynamic range, which is still greater on film than it is on digital. So one of the advantages to these cameras is that you can take really high resolution photos with great dynamic range, and you can either scan these and upload them digitally onto your computer and then print them out, and that's what I tend to do nowadays, because for myself, making wet prints is kind of a difficult thing. I don't have a dark room at home, and renting a dark room here is a little bit difficult. But you can kind of do what they call the hybrid system, where you shoot with film cameras and you can edit these photographs digitally and share them digitally. And that's something which I do with these. I've even done it with large format photographs. Just be warned that the file sizes on a medium format or a large format image are going to be quite ridiculous. And even low resolution scans of medium or large format film give you really big files. But when you zoom in on these files and you just keep zooming and zooming and zooming in onto the smallest part of the image and then blowing it up and being able to see it in detail, when you do that, then you can kind of appreciate why people like medium or larger format photography. Another interesting thing about these cameras, and a camera like this one with just the plain waist level prism, is that you have to set the exposure manually on these cameras. You can use a light meter to kind of give you an idea of what the aperture and shutter should be for a particular scene that you're shooting at, but you still have to use your brain a little bit. And when you have to input these things yourself manually after looking at a light meter, you kind of begin to learn the mathematics behind making a correct exposure. And the correct exposure is just a simple mathematical formula which is dependent on three different things. The film speed, the shutter speed, and the aperture. So the film speed is the basic, the foundation of the formula, and using that and the amount of light which is, I guess, falling on your image, this allows you, you can set the exposure using the aperture and shutter speed, either more or less aperture, more or less shutter speed, so you get whatever setting which matches the figure of your film speed. It's a little bit more difficult to explain this way, but it's not really that difficult to explain once you get one of these cameras and go out and start shooting with it. The wonderful thing about this is even if you shoot digital, and a lot of modern digital cameras of course have full manual operation, once you understand the math of taking a film exposure or a photographic exposure in your head, it makes it easier to understand and easier to make good exposures when you're using something like an automatic or a digital camera. And I find a lot that I'm very seldom satisfied with the exposure and metering which I get on modern digital cameras. They tend to try to get the most poppiest, most detailed, or whatever kind of image, and which really looks good when you're thinking about buying a camera. But when you're actually making real images to share or to sell, they end up not being so good. And being able to manually override, the camera's brain with your own brain can help you make photographs that your brain is more happy with. And a camera like this, or a simple 35mm old SLR camera, rangefinder or whatever, using these is a great way to really, I guess, jump in with both feet into photography and understand how it works. And of course, I'll kind of go over this as I describe this camera, and maybe you'll pick up a little bit of insight into photography as well as how to operate a camera. So I said before, we have a film back, we have the camera body, we have the lens on the front, the shutter, mirror, and film plane. Pretty much all the basic things that any camera has, except you would replace this with a sensor in a digital camera. We have to have a way to focus the camera, and this camera here, you simply lift up the window on the top, and if you look inside, you'll see kind of a glass lens there. That's the focusing screen. And this is what is called a waist level finder. So you hold the camera at waist level and you look through the top here. And if you look through the top, you can probably see the leaves and stuff and the buildings shown on the focus screen. When you look through the top, that's what the lens of the camera is seeing. And of course, everything is upside down because that's what lenses do in a typical a reflex camera. The prism in say an SLR camera reverses it, so it looks normal. But when it comes through the lens, it's upside down. You can focus just fine this way if your eyes are really good. If your eyes aren't so good, the Bronica offers a pop-up focusing loop, which magnifies the focusing screen and allows you to focus with more precision. Wonderful, I guess, feature that the SQ has is this little knurled ring which goes around the focusing loop. And if you turn this one way or the other, you can adjust this to match your eyesight. So if you wear eyeglasses and your vision isn't as sharp as it should be, like my eyes are not as sharp as they were when I was much younger, being able to adjust this a little bit allows you to focus with much more precision and to take off your glasses if you wear glasses and just focus by looking through the camera. That's one less thing to have to look through when you are operating the camera. To close this, you simply push it down like so, and then you kind of squeeze these things here together and then fold it back. Behind that we have this dial here, and this is a film speed dial. And as this camera is a fully manual camera, dial is just kind of a reminder, like I've said in the old manual cameras or mechanical cameras, to remind you what kind of film you have loaded in the camera. On the top here we have this clear glass window. This is the film counter. We have these kind of buttons here, and these pop open the film door like so. And this allows you to remove the film back. And when you're replacing the film or loading film, you drop it in like so, and then simply close the door until it latches. On the other side here, we have kind of a few important things. The most important, of course, is the shutter speed dial. And as you turn the dial, the numbers change in the top. And we have a shutter speed range in this camera from 8 seconds to up to 1/500th of a second. And this camera doesn't have a focal plane shutter. It has a lens shutter, which is kind of odd in a medium format camera, in that the lens shutter is electronically controlled, which allows for really great precision, and also makes the center part of the camera less complicated. Of course, it makes the lens more complicated, but it kind of balances out the design of the camera. On the top here, in the front of the shutter speed lens, we have a lever, which is the release lever for the lens. You pull that downward, and the lens pops off like so. And as you can kind of see the electrical contacts here, which are used to actuate the shutter. To reattach the lens, you line up this red dot by my finger to the orange dot on the top of the camera, and then turn clockwise if you're behind the camera, or say, yeah, clockwise, or counterclockwise if you're looking at the camera, or maybe still clockwise. Anyway, over here we have a battery check button, and down here we have a button which you use to remove the entire film back. These cameras were made to take an assortment of different kind of backs. You could get a Polaroid back for one of these cameras. Different kind of things can be adapted. This camera has a 120 roll film back attached to it right now, but 220 backs are available if you want to use 220 film. On the bottom here we have this kind of little threaded hole, and this is for adding something like a flash accessory bracket or handle bracket. Moving to the other side here, we have a lever which you push down to remove the finder. Simply slides back like so. You'll see that there are electrical contacts located in the finder. This is if you are using a metered prism. This is just the simple basic waist level prism, so there are no contacts on it. And you simply slide it back forward till it locks in place. Behind that you have a multiple exposure lever, which is kind of an odd thing nowadays, but way back, from the 80s earlier, this was a really wonderful high-tech accessory for being able to take 2 or 3 or 4 exposures on a single sheet of film. And if you look at like some of the early photographers, was Eisenstadt and guys like that, were able to take really wonderful multiple exposures in their old cameras, their large format cameras. And this was a feature which a lot of people enjoyed using for decades and decades. And I don't see it a lot now used in digital photography, though it's certainly possible in some cameras, but it's nice to have this on here because it's really wonderful to play around with film. And of course here we have the film winding and shutter charging lever. And as you turn this, you can kind of notice this lever turning in the back, and that lets you know that the film is winding. On the bottom of the camera we have the battery chamber here, which is a little bit difficult for me to play with right now because it's quite cold and I'm not wearing gloves. But you can spot it here, it just says battery, and if you pop this off, it uses the same battery as like the Canon A1, AE1, F1. It uses the 4LR44 6-volt battery. You can find these on Amazon for next to nothing. Personally, I recommend say 4L or 4SR44 batteries, the silver oxide batteries, because they perform better and they're more reliable. Moving to the back of the camera here, we just have kind of the holder here for putting in the top of the film card, or 120 roll film comes in these little cardboard boxes. At least it does when you buy it in the individual rolls. You just tear off the top and you put it in the back, and that lets you know what film you have loaded in the camera without having to fumble with the film speed setting here. Loading the film in the camera is not so difficult. I showed you earlier about how to open the film door. Once that's open, you pop this out, and this is the film back, and you have a take-up spool, and you would have a film spool as well. And if I were loading film in this camera, I would set, let's see, how would I go ahead and operate this? I would go ahead and put the take-up spool here where it is, put the film spool on the top. To put the spools in, simply pull on the plunger, and this pops out here, allows you to put the spool in, then put that back down into place, and it locks it. You have to put down the film in a way that the back paper backing is going to come around the front and the colored paper backing is going to stay on the inside. It's a little bit backwards compared to how you load something like a Mamiya roll film back or a twin lens reflex camera. So when you wrap it around, the black part of the paper should come over the pressure plate here and fed into the take-up spool. And you simply wind and wind and wind and wind. And as you wind it, you'll see the other, the film roll unwinding, and series of numbers or dots or whatever comes up, and eventually an arrow which goes all the way across comes out of the film, and you simply line it up with this red spot here by where my finger is. Once that's lined up, you go ahead and reinstall your film back. This should be on the right side here on your right hand. Just drop it in like so, close the door, and then wind and wind and wind and wind until the number 1 pops up here in the viewfinder, and then the camera is ready to go. For shooting the camera, the first thing of course you have to do is set the exposure, and I have kind of it's getting a little bit, the shade is starting to come over me right now, so maybe I'm looking at say f8, and maybe 1/125th of a second would be kind of good for this, the pond behind where the camera is. So I have the exposure set, the film is wound, everything is charged up. I just need to pop open the finder, pop open the focus loop, then I would simply focus, compose, and then shoot. I don't have any film loaded in the camera, so it's not shooting right now, but that's pretty much basically how it works. So anyway, I'm about almost 20 minutes in this video, quite a long video. Sorry for taking so long to describe it and maybe rambling on about things maybe some of you aren't interested in. Now that I'm back and I'm getting caught up with shipping and getting everything else done, I'll have time to make more videos. I plan to be listing more and more cameras as time goes by. If you'd like to see those, please visit my online stores. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.